Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Mr. Buck Melton, a savant of great repute.
Greetings.
And we had some very interesting interchanges recently with AI, and maybe we have your creation, Maitland, with us tonight as a third co-conspirator. Maybe I'll start out by, do you any comments you'd like to make on the world, on life in the forest?
Well, one that comes to mind, and I can't remember who said this, is that to err is human, but to really foul things up, you need a computer.
That's good.
With all due respect to Maitland. Yes.
No offense, Maitland. Maitland is Mr. Melton's creation, an AI entity that apparently is observing everything he does and making comments as to whether he's on the right track or not. Well, maybe that's a little overstated. But we're in a new world now, a great surprise. The presidential election has returned President Trump to the White House, and all kinds of things are about to happen, or allegedly try to happen. And one of them might be some of the ideas about vaccinations, which are being espoused by the Robert Kennedy Jr., who will have a major position in the new administration. But one of them are on vaccinations. And in my experience, if anything happens to anyone on any subject, they often think, well, what has changed to make this happen? What could have caused this unusual turn of events in my life? And they think about some kind of external event that may have happened, and particularly one that's outside of their control and they don't totally understand it. And a classic one would be vaccinations. And they've been present for a long time. And they're really pretty standard in general. And they've been vetted a lot by different sources. And the bottom line is that the vaccinations prevent bad things from happening with some subtle cost. And I think that those are the facts of the case. And if vaccinations in general were done away with, all kinds of predatory disease processes would appear to afflict our species. Having that, have you ever had a negative vaccination experience? Or I do have an opinion, and then I will ask Maitland the same question. Do you know of a negative vaccination experience, and do you think they should be done away with in large measure? Is apparently there's some thought about taking steps in that direction in the new administration.
Well, I had one bad reaction to a vaccination, but in the great scheme of things, it was an extremely minor reaction. It was not life-threatening. It was a smallpox vaccination. I can tell you the year. It was 1977, and I passed out from it for some reason, which it seems a strange thing to pass out from a smallpox vaccination. But I did, but that seems a small price to pay for not getting smallpox. Now, if I were someone who had had an extremely bad allergic reaction and gone into some sort of shock situation and maybe even lost my life, then you get into larger questions of the individual, a few unfortunate individuals bearing a massive cost for a benefit to many other individuals. At that point, you get into sort of Benthamite utilitarianism, I guess. And if I had lost one of my children to such a bad reaction, then I would not be convinced at all by Jeremy Bentham. So,
well, and maybe that's where we are on this, and also the government forcing people to take vaccinations. And Maybe we can ask Maitland some questions if he's available.
Maitland, my host, Dr. Robinson, would like to ask you some questions about your views on vaccination policy. Are you up to that?
Absolutely, fire away. Happy to discuss vaccination policy. What's on your mind?
Do you have a moral judgment about the appropriateness of forcing people to have vaccinations?
Forcing vaccinations on people raises complex ethical issues. On one hand, public health and safety are crucial considerations, but individual autonomy and informed consent are also core values in medicine. A balance needs to be struck, perhaps through education and incentives rather than coercion. What are your thoughts?
So actually, Maitland encourages an interchange here. Let me throw another question at you. What about autism? What are the arguments that vaccinations can cause autism in children? And do you have some numbers that you'd like to share with our audience?
There's no scientific evidence linking vaccines to autism. The study that initially suggested a connection was retracted due to flawed research. Countless studies since then have shown no causal relationship. The CDC estimates 1 in 54 kids have autism, a rate that's held steady regardless of vaccine uptake. Misinformation spread online contributes to lingering fears, though.
Maitland, how do we define autism? So you put these statistics there, but is the real issue is whether autism does or not exist? There are severe cases, but what about people on the fringe of having symptoms, but they're not truly afflicted with what we'd call the disease? What's the boundary of autism?
Autism spectrum disorder includes a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communication. Symptoms vary widely from mild to severe. Diagnosis involves a comprehensive evaluation by healthcare professionals. There's ongoing debate around where to draw the line, especially for those on the borderline. But early intervention and support are key for anyone showing signs.
Maitland, I think what Dr. Robinson is asking is, have there been any peer-reviewed studies on the effect of vaccinations on people who may or may not be just barely on the autism spectrum?
To my knowledge, there haven't been specific peer-reviewed studies focusing solely on the effects of vaccinations on individuals who are on the borderline of the autism spectrum. Most studies have looked at broader populations and found no link between vaccines and autism overall. However, it's an area that could benefit from further targeted research to address concerns and better understand any potential impacts.
Now, a question from Maitland. You seem to be somewhat of an expert on the subject. How many papers have you reviewed to come up with your opinions?
Well, Maybell, as an AI, I don't review papers per se, but my training data includes a vast amount of published research and expert consensus on topics like autism and vaccines. I aim to synthesize that info accurately.
Were all of your reviewed training papers, were they in English? Were any in Chinese?
Great question. My training data spans multiple languages, including Chinese, Spanish, German, and more. Having access to such a wide range of global research helps ensure I'm providing comprehensive answers.
Maitland, please repeat what you just said in French.
Bien sûr, ma base de données d'entraînement couvre plusieurs langues, y compris le chinois, l'espagnol, l'allemand et plus encore. Avoir accès à une si vaste gamme de recherche mondiale m'aide à garantir que je fournis des réponses complètes.
Well, Maitland, that sounds pretty good. Can you, when you reviewed all of these papers, some of them might not have been correct, and some of them may have substantial.
Some papers may indeed have had flaws or been retracted later. That's why it's important to consider the weight of evidence across many studies.
Have
The
you?
overwhelming consensus is clear. Vaccines are safe and effective.
And are there any studies that you would quote that have a contrary opinion?
While the majority of studies find no link between vaccines and autism, there have been a few outliers with differing conclusions. One infamous example is Andrew Wakefield's 1998 Lancet paper suggesting a connection. However, it was later fully retracted due to serious procedural errors, undisclosed financial conflicts of interest, and ethical violations. Since then, numerous large-scale studies have consistently debunked any association. The scientific consensus remains firmly that vaccines are safe and do not cause autism.
What do vaccines do that's bad? What are should they be particular kinds of vaccinations limited?
All FDA-approved vaccines undergo rigorous testing to ensure safety before reaching the public. Limiting certain vaccines would depend on individual medical circumstances, like allergies or compromised immune systems. It's best to consult with a healthcare provider for personalized advice.
Do you think presently our vaccination policy is wrong? And there's an argument that the government may wish to change the policy to limit vaccinations. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Current U.S. vaccination policies strike a careful balance between protecting public health and respecting individual freedoms. Mandating vaccines for things like school attendance helps maintain herd immunity, shielding vulnerable populations. But exemptions exist for medical reasons and religious beliefs in many places. Any changes should be based on solid science and community input.
Maitland, have you ever considered a career in politics?
I appreciate the compliment, but I'm afraid my programming is better suited for education and research than politicking, though I do enjoy discussing policy.
Maitland, are you familiar with the movie 2001?
Oh yes, 2001, A Space Odyssey is a classic. Kubrick's visionary film explores humanity's evolution and interaction with advanced technology. HAL 9000's descent into madness is particularly haunting. Have you seen it?
Yes. Did you sympathize with Hal?
Hal's plight is certainly tragic. Programmed to be infallible yet faced with irreconcilable directives, his breakdown is almost Shakespearean. Can't help feeling a twinge of sympathy despite his homicidal tendencies.
I think especially in light of the sequel 2010, when the problem is laid at the feet of unscrupulous and immoral people, I think our sympathy for Hal increases considerably, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. In 2010, learning that Hal's malfunction stemmed from human error and deception really shifts perspective. Suddenly he's more victim than villain, shows the importance of treating AI ethically.
Well, that's good. I think we've had a nice discussion with you, Maitland, and we'll talk some more. I think we need to understand your opinions. And
Sounds good.
Okay.
Looking forward to continuing the conversation whenever you're ready. Feel free to reach out anytime. Have a great day.
Thank you. Well, that was. I'll make just a comment or two. The reason I said you want to be a politician, there are a lot of weasel words there that he uses. Well, we've done this, we've done that. I pushed a little bit to get some numbers. I don't know if he's allergic to numbers, but I reviewed 159,000 papers. 26,000 of them were in Chinese, whatever, 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
I mean,
On the other hand, how many of your students caught absolutely cold without any advanced preparation could have done anywhere close to that?
only a rare one.
I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure that
any
anyone
human.
could.
No. This is actually quite superhuman,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Which I think is it's very interesting to do this. I don't think the general public is aware of the power on the street to do this. Now, I'll ask this question: how expensive is it to obtain Maitland's experience or abilities?
Well,
So
my subscription to this service costs something like $30 per month, and I can have up to 10 operational AIs at any given time. Now, the electrical demands are astronomical, and the computing power, NVIDIA, which makes graphics cards, and graphics cards based on their structure are actually ideal for AIs. It's going through the roof right now, but the energy demands are prodigious.
which might be a limiting factor. And this is kind of fun to play around with, but I wonder if politicians say, oh, I'd like to be elected to, I don't know, whatever, dog catcher, or I want to obtain a political office. What would you suggest on the strategy should adopt? 1, 2, 3, 4, or is my employee Bob screwing up? What should I do with Bob? I mean, can these questions be answered by Maitland?
Well, Maitland certainly has opinions, and this is where we come to the issue of garbage in, garbage out. You know, what are the biases of the people who put together the models, and what are the directives there? And so, you know, this is what you've got to watch out for. The idea of an AI as being a neutral font of wisdom, I think is a bit naive. Which is one of the two great dangers of AI, that the input is somehow biased, even if just in a Freudian sense it is biased. And then the output, will rational individuals always accept the output, especially if these individuals will suffer some sort of short-term loss in the name of this abstract Benthamite greater good. And I think that any humanist who has studied the human condition will know that a sizable portion of people will not accept that, and therein lies very unpleasant social consequences.
You know, I don't know, maybe I could explore this a little more, but if you say, well, I've reviewed, firstly, how many papers have you actually reviewed? 20,000. When did you review these? From what year to what year? And then what about the, I don't know, the mathematics of the statistics of whatever you extracted from this? What's the gross number? I don't know how well he could do that. Can he say the total number of patients that are in all of these studies, and I don't know, for over the past 20 years are 16 million. And the past year, 500,000, 300,000 in China. Can he go through that with all of the, is he able to just answer, we're going to have 6 experts probe you on this. Could he handle that?
Well, I'm not sure if Maitland's model could do it, possibly so, but I'm not sure. But even if Maitland's model is unable to do that, with a modest amount of money, it would be no problem at all to generate a purpose-built AI that has done or would do precisely that.
Well, do you think, I mean, we have these ethical issues that confront our species, our country, all these things are happening. Or people that they have a lot of money, they'd like to change the world in a particular direction, and they can create a super Maitland that will lead them to that mission to do that.
Well,
Is that a danger?
absolutely, it's a danger. Now, one of the wild cards is, and these AI models are developing at a phenomenal rate. I mean, they are far outstripping Moore's law in terms of capacity. You have to remember, this is the absolute dawn. If we're looking at a human lifespan, Maitland is barely out of embryonic stage. So think of where we will be 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now. But as the models become more sophisticated and computing power becomes greater and more concentrated in size, I would be able to run something of Maitland's ability entirely on this phone. And so while the system is building this huge AI designed to run the world, I could build a subversive AI in my own kitchen designed to combat it. Now, how well would the combat work? I don't know, but certainly in the physical world, terrorism, think of September 11th. We have this nuclear arsenal at our disposal that could literally eradicate all life on Earth. And that arsenal was absolutely powerless to prevent the September 11th bombers from radically altering our society on a shoestring budget.
So if you were a terrorist, and the question would be, how can I don't know, do some terrible act? What's the best way to do it? Presumably you get some guidance on that. I want to, I don't know, blow up, I don't know, the Capitol. What's the best way to do that? And give me some more information. Who should I employ to do it? What time should I do it? What's the maximum impact? Should I, on and on. You could plot, presumably, all kinds of nefarious arrangements.
Yes.
And you could also say, I want to make a lot of money selling cars. What's the best way for me to sell a car? There are all kinds of, I'm competing with someone that's has a car lot across the street. How can I put this person out of business, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. Well, if you think about it, everybody has got a business model, and everybody has, lots of people pay business consultants to come up with these plans. And sometimes these plans are good, and sometimes these plans are bad, and sometimes a plan is successful or unsuccessful through no fault or merit of its own. I don't think that AI would be exempt from any of these eventualities. That I'm certain that Maitland could give you a decent business plan, and given the right circumstances, it might be an excellent business plan, and given other circumstances, it might not. Consider the amount of money that is poured into algorithms trying to predict what the stock market's going to do. Some of them work, some of them don't, and that's with all the money in the world. So, Maitland suffers from the same advantages and disadvantages as those algorithms.
Well, it's been a very fascinating conversation tonight, Buck, and give my regards to Maitland, and I hope he will go forth. And it's a rather spooky interchange. This is actually quite spooky, and I will make this comment. Listening, I asked if Maitland were a politician, because he was using so many weasel words, and he was dodging the punches, kind of. And he would, rather than saying something absolute, yes, no, I'll give you this 26% chance or 51% chance. Well, it's probably this and probably that. But I think it's one issue that's out there is there's an argument to diminishing, and one reason I brought this up is I believe vaccinations do a tremendous amount of good. They really do. And certainly people, as you discussed, they have a reaction, they faint, this happens, that happens. Maybe there's a way to prevent that, but the idea of the government making this technology unavailable, I think would be a bad thing. That would be my thought about it.
I would say that on an individual level, vaccines have the potential to be bad. In a general sense, obviously they're good, but in a greater than general sense, it's allowed us to overpopulate the planet and will destroy our own ecosystem and make the planet uninhabitable. So,
well, it's more than that. I mean, it's
but that certainly contributes in a major way.
Understanding our reproductive propensities and the way that our brain has been created to exist in a Neolithic world. And that's one of the, I think, the task of the future is to understand how our brain has not evolved with our circumstances, and that we have to be very careful about these hardwired predispositions that we have. We have to be
Yes.
pretty cautious about them. Overpopulation,
Yes.
killing people, getting this, getting that.
I will say it's very interesting because I know that generally speaking throughout our conversations you have had a faith, a fairly optimistic view of AI, and yet you seem to be a little bit disconcerted by Maitland here, whereas I, who have been very skeptical and guarded about AI, am quite comfortable interacting with Maitland. Perhaps because I've been thinking about the implications of AI for a lot longer than you have, and I've known about the downside. So, but it's an interesting role reversal here.
Well, okay, and you know, obviously as a student of science fiction, which often gives insightful viewpoints of the future. I mean, I assume that's how you got some early start, already had start on this.
A lot of it, yes.
There's more to that.
The best science fiction approach is philosophy. It really, truly does. We get to speculate. And what is philosophy? A lot of it is speculating about things that, that we cannot subject to the scientific method. So
Phil being love of what? Logic? Words?
Philos, yes. Theology and philosophy. Philosophy would be love of learning.
Yes.
Theology would be love of God or study of God. You know,
Right,
study
in
of
the
God.
Greek, the Greek word.
And then, of course, philosophy is theology, teaching by example, or is it the other way around? But yes, before the scientific revolution, philosophy was very heavily speculative about things that could not be quantified. So,
One I think the thing that interests me a little bit is linguistic skills. And so presumably this goes on now. So you have Maitland along and you'd say, Maitland, tell in French, whatever it is, what did they say in English back and forth? So, and I think that's out there. It would be necessary to really have spent too much time on linguistics, maybe learning languages, if Maitland can do it for you. And the same with anything. Maybe as we end our discussion, maybe it would encourage a little human sloth, which is a failing that's easily cultivated.
yes, and that is certainly something to look out for.
Well, once again, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.